Hello everybody, happy Thanksgiving. Mark Schaftlein with you. This is the Schaftlein Report. Happy to have you with us today as we're broadcasting from our studios in Irvine, California. And we want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. Hopefully everybody had a great turkey dinner today. And as you tune in, we'll bring you some status about where we are as a country right now. And if it's Thanksgiving, I want to welcome back my good friend from the East Coast in the great state of Connecticut, Joe Visconti. Happy Thanksgiving to you. Happy to have you with me today.
Happy Thanksgiving to you too, Mark. Thanks for having me on. What a beautiful country. That's all I have to say, no matter what.
Yeah, it really is, Joe. I mean, that we have a lot of blessings in this country. I know we've got a lot of issues throughout the country, but the United States is still the greatest country in the world, a wonderful place to grow up, raise your family, prosper, and I could not be happier. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of issues, and we're going to talk about those, but being an American on Thanksgiving, football, John Madden, turkey, dumplings, mashed potatoes, and maybe a little bit of wine here and there. I mean, what a great American holiday, pumpkin pie, etc. And hopefully your favorite football team won today. Joe, I do want to talk about the status of the country right now, okay? And, you know, I know I talked on my Tuesday show about what was going on in the status of the election, and the results aren't going to be materially different from when I talked Tuesday to today, but Donald Trump is really sitting in the catbird seat right now, in my opinion, and I want to hear if you share this. I mean, the polling averages that have come out, Donald Trump, depending on if it's a two-way, three-way, or even a five-way race, he is leading in the general election from 5 to 9 points. Joe, that's outside the margin of error. And I know I'm going to give you credit on this. You've been saying for months that A, Trump would be the nominee, and B, Trump would win. How do you feel where we're sitting out here now? A lot of commentators are saying 11 months till voting starts. It's really 10 because a lot of states vote early. Give me a snapshot of what you're seeing right now.
Well, I don't think much could happen that would make the numbers change. I don't think the Biden administration is able to recover some of the things that they have allowed to happen in the last 3.5 years. And so there's no coming back for them. Even if they adopt the Trump policies, it would make Trump even stronger because he could say, I've been telling you that for 3.5 years. And again, I was hoping, I shouldn't say hoping, but I was hoping I was right that Newsom would get in. And that's still a possibility. I just think the Democrats are looking at, what do? We jail Trump and he'll win anyway from prison? I mean, so they really don't have anything left. And so what'll happen is I think common sense is ruling. Americans aren't, they're not stupid. It's not even political parties. Everything is going sideways because of the policies of the Democrat Party, not necessarily Joe Biden. And these policies are going to make more pain come this year. But more than the pain, the conscious awareness that, hey, everybody has seen these shows in the last 4 years, and they're all watching all the different things happening on all the issues. And there's so much information out there that everybody knows the game right now. And so they're either going to stick with your party or a candidate like Biden, or you're going to just stay home. And so it's going to get better for Trump. And I do feel upset about DeSantis because I didn't want him to continue to harm himself. And it looks like some of his numbers in Florida are brutal. And I hope he gets out of it quickly so he can recover and be the future of the party down the road.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think, both Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, Nikki Haley, all have bright futures in the Republican Party. They're all young, relatively young people. So to me, and I look back in some great Republicans. Ronald Reagan lost 2 tries going for the White House. Richard Nixon got it on his 3rd try. So, Nixon got it on his 4th try, rather. So I don't think there's any shame in losing to Donald Trump. I mean, assuming that ends up being the end result. And like I mentioned on the Tuesday show, Trump's up a minimum of 30 points in some of these states. But I do want to mention this. Nikki Haley's a good person. 2-term governor of South Carolina, has a very good track record. Solid job as UN ambassador. Vivek Ramaswamy is an ultra successful businessman. And whether you agree or disagree with him, the man speaks his mind, which is a refreshing thing. Ron DeSantis is an extremely successful two-term governor in the state of Florida, where 800 people a day are moving into the state. Okay, and Chris Christie, he was a Republican governor in a blue state. I know him and Trump are on the outs right now, and I get that. But at the end of the day, Republicans are going to have to come together, and to defeat Joe Biden, there can't be a fracture in the party, because as we've seen, Democrats, it's like a monolithic deal. It doesn't matter if they have party differences, Joe. They come together, and we're going to have to really keep an eye when the voting starts, make sure it's fair. But right now, I feel it's Donald Trump's race to lose.
Yeah, you're correct. You were totally correct. And I picked Nikki Haley for VP months ago when I saw her at the Prescott Bush Awards dinner in Connecticut. The GOP over here has a dinner, and she was a keynote speaker. I still think that that's the winning ticket, Trump-Haley. Contrary to her not being those right-wingers, we don't need right. We got Trump. DeSantis, again, we'll have to, I think how they kiss and make up at the, I don't think it'll be bitter like Reagan Ford. And I remember that.
Yeah,
actually
sure.
I wired President Ford with microphones when he spoke here in Hartford in 1976, and Jimmy Carter wired him the week after. So I remember that really clearly as a young man. And I don't think it'll be as bitter, because Reagan was a little more bitter. I think DeSantis is just going to have to realize the reality, and then come on board and go. And he has to go all in. There's no half measures to endorse Trump at the right time. But I think Nikki is the VP. I don't care what anybody says. She's what the party needs, not just because she's a woman, but because she's really, I see her as the future of the Republican Party.
Well, Joe, she's certainly a good spokesperson on a lot of issues that, frankly, men stumble over when they talk about them. I don't need to get into too much of that on a festive day like today. But listen, whether Trump picks Nikki Haley or whether he picks Ron DeSantis or whomever he chooses, I'm sure we're going to get, quality individual. And I'm also going to assume this, that I believe the party will come together. But again, we haven't even had the first vote yet. So, despite the fact that former President Trump is up in the polls, look, folks, politics changes. And, we don't start voting in Iowa until January, okay? You have the Iowa caucuses followed by the New Hampshire primary. And so, we're still a couple months away, but think about that. I mean, we're in November. They're going to be voting in January. Okay, so the first, piece of the American democracy, this great republic that we have, that we're celebrating today, will be out voting. And Joe, I think, I do want to give you kudos because you've said it all along. But again, they do have to vote. And I sense, despite what the media will tell you, that's why you're viewing shows like this, there will be a coming together on the Republican side. And those anti-Trumpers, those never-Trumpers, look, where are they going to go? They're not going to hitch their wagon to Joe Biden. Some of them may go to RFK Jr., possibly. We don't know what Joe Manchin's going to do, but we're going to know soon enough.
But I think Trump just running and being where he is now is very healthy for the country on Thanksgiving, because people are going to think about spending money for Christmas and holidays. And as they do, they can look to the future and go, okay, how am I going to pay this? Is this kind of making it bad? It's going to probably get worse under Biden, but there's hope. I could hang out for a year and hold out to pay down my debt because Trump will be coming back. So he can actually help the Christmas sales, I think, versus the doom and gloom of not knowing what's coming. So I think the country is going to do a lot of healing between today, Thanksgiving, and New Year's, as us Americans and people going, this is what we're dealing with. We got to make changes no matter what we feel politically. And people we got kids to raise, and we got a world, unless there's World War III, which I think is going to get settled pretty soon. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I just think the country's going through a whole
Remember the old Ronald Reagan quote, "Are you better now than we were 4 years ago?" And as we sit here on this most American of holidays, Thanksgiving evening, you have to ask that question. A lot of Americans are saying, no, they're not better off than they were 4 years ago. And a lot of them are saying, you know what, I don't agree with Trump on everything. The showmanship, to this, to that, but you know what? My life was better 4 years ago than it is right now. Or in this case, 3, because we still have 1 more year under Biden to go. But the point being is, people felt better then, even in the midst, of a pandemic, than they do right now. So I have this sense that things are changing. And, you mentioned Governor Newsom. It is quickly approaching a point, Joe, where, again, I still have my doubts that Biden will be the nominee. But if these poll numbers continue to deteriorate, and if the public perception of Joe being somewhat, less than all there, I mean, he turned 81 earlier in the week, and you didn't hear a peep about it. So, we're going to have to deal with that. But, we talked about the economy. Look, inflation's come down. We're all sitting here this Thanksgiving Day. Certain prices of some things have come down, but a lot of other things have gone up. So there's this unease that Americans have. Yeah, gas prices across some parts of the country are back, in the $3 range, but not on the West Coast. They're still hovering above $5 on the West Coast. So there's still inflation. There's that economic insecurity that, people are having to deal with. Joe, the interest rates are still high. And again, there's no guarantee they can't go a little higher if some of this inflation does not remain under control. And then, of course, the country is still heavily in debt. I think our debt to GDP is running right now, Joe, about 120%. We got about a minute left in this segment. Give me your impressions on the economy.
Well, I think today, Thanksgiving, is a day that a lot of people having dinner with family members is going to be a very healing time, because everyone really is concerned about more than economics and more about war. And the big thing that they think about is, can we get along, and what happened to us being free and doing what we want to do as Americans? And I think that's the worst thing that Biden has done, divided us so that the free speech, the ability to be what we want to be, equal justice, a lot of that's social stuff. And I think this dinner that everybody's having today is really going to settle a lot of that. I can't wait to read a lot of the New York Times write-ups on this issue.
Well, as always, Joe, you got your pulse on the American public. Folks, we're going to be back in 1 minute. We'll have Mark and Joe on the other side of the break. Stay tuned. See you in a minute.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most private assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott, PhD, 720-605-3900. Banks are supposed to be the safest placeholders for cash in the world, but in 2022 that changed. The Federal Reserve pulled out $2.5 trillion of liquidity out of the banks, and the Fed also changed the requirements so banks don't need to keep any funds on hand. This means banks are starved for liquidity and have now become very dangerous places to hold your assets. Get out of the system with the world's safest and most private assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott, PhD at 720-605-3900.
Joe, we're back. Listen, one thing that on this Thanksgiving weekend where we're having turkey and watching a lot of football and hopefully your favorite team won, our Border Patrol agents, they never get to rest. And the big cities are being flooded with illegals continuing. We have a porous security on that border. There's no telling, how many foreign agents have gotten in, possible terrorists coming across that border. I mean, Joe, while we're sitting here and enjoying this, holiday, this great American holiday today, a lot of our fellow Americans are having to deal with just the most horrific border policies of the Biden administration. And it's gotten so bad that all these illegals that end up going into the cities, now the big city mayors are saying, look, we can't cope with this. Eric Adams was the latest in New York City to talk about it. And they're having these shelters, these homeless places, even resorting to hotels getting overrun. It's putting a tax on the local services, and yet, here again, no action from the Biden administration. And it's just, Joe, I mean, as we celebrate this great American holiday, it just seems like this administration is hell-bent on having more and more illegal immigrants coming across that border and making life miserable in our cities. And it's leading to higher crimes. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're on the West Coast, Washington, D.C., East Coast, or somewhere in between. You see it on your news every night. Joe, is there anything other than having Donald Trump elected president that can slow that down?
Well, I think the border states are really going to be the deciding reason that Trump gets in. And even Newsom would, if he got in, he's going to have a problem because he's allowing it, and that's his biggest problem. And they're probably weighing that. Why let him get in? Because this issue is just the border states, the swing states. Don't count out New Mexico. I mean, people are like, oh, New Mexico's blue. Don't count it out. I think you're going to see a lot of changes on that issue this coming year with the human element. And let's stick with that beyond the word illegal, which I use all the time, and sanctuary, etc. But the reality is there's kids. There's people that are working class and they're not educated. They don't understand the human trafficking, the drugs, all of that. All that is really going to be the thing that Americans are looking at and saying, wait a second, we don't have the social safety net to really deal with this. And it's going to come to our local school districts. I remember being a town councilor years ago in my town, and I couldn't know by federal law who was there, but the town manager and the Board of Education told us, yes, there are children of illegal aliens, illegal children here in our school system. So that was years ago, and it's even worse. So what happens is, how do you employ? There's only so many working class people that are going to be required in America. You can't have 30, 40, 50 million people that are not educated. They're not necessary. So what happens if they can't find work? And don't think we're going to have these economic booms where building and restaurants are the only labor that they're going to be able to get. We may have a huge problem. And I think that human element coupled with the future, we're going to find out the numbers. The public is going to really make the decision on the border states. That's what put Trump back in office.
Yeah, I concur with you completely on that. And, again, while we're sitting here on this great American holiday, in relative peace in the United States, I know we have a divided country. We got wackos on the left that are supporting Hamas. But, Joe, while Donald Trump was president, there were not two major wars going on. I mean, I can't sit here and, quote, blame the Israeli war on Joe Biden. I'm not going down that path. But I do know the fact that when Xi Jinping was visiting Mar-a-Lago and Trump leaned over and he says, hey, we just took out a terrorist, Soleimani, with a missile. I mean, Trump didn't mess around. I mean, when they were talking about North Korea, Trump flat out said, if they do this, there will not be a North Korea. Now, maybe it was bluster, maybe it was idle threat, I don't know. But I do know one thing, there were not two wars going on while Donald Trump was president, major wars. And there's a lot of people saying, look, if Trump had been in office, Putin would not have attacked Ukraine. Counterfactual, we'll never know the answer to that. But as we sit here in the United States, in the relative peace and tranquility compared to certainly what's happening in Eastern Europe and over in Israel, besides the economy, Joe, where people are saying, hey, I'm not better off than I was then, I think a lot of people are saying, you know what? The world's not better off now than it was when Donald Trump was president.
Mark, I've been polling a lot of people, which I do everywhere I go. I just do it, and people know who I am. And I speak with I'm in a Democrat town, and here's the thing that comes out from Republicans, conservatives, Democrats. Trump will be back, and people know that. But they ask me, well, what then? Because he did great in 4 years. He comes back and he repairs the world again. And are these monsters are going to come back in the Democrat Party and do this worse than Biden did? In other words, this is only 4 years we're getting. What happens to the future? And that problem is something, that issue is something the public is really wrestling with. It's almost like a recurring alcoholic in your family. Will they ever really recover? Will they go off the wagon, or someone in drug abuse? I mean, how many times can a family deal with that before they're put away? And so institutionalized. So it's the same thing politically. All right, we get 4 years of recovery and everything's good, and we get back on track. And what's next? Are we going to get somebody that's going to really do worse than Biden did intentionally? Policies we've seen intentionally destroy the world. How do we guarantee we're going to get more than 4 more years? That's down the road a little bit, but it's on people's minds.
Yeah, there's no question. There's no question about that. And Joe, we were talking about our cities and what happened, and we all saw what happened about a week ago when China's President Xi came to San Francisco. How Gavin Newsom fully admitted, yeah, we cleaned up the streets of San Francisco, got rid of the homeless, got rid of the druggies because we wanted to impress Xi. And I still can't get out of my the sight of all those Chinese flags. But having said that, Joe, China is clearly making a global sort of initiative to be branded as the second superpower, equal footing with the United States. There's a lot of issues in that Chinese economy right now, and as we sit here on Thanksgiving Day, it's clear to me that China wants to be viewed as an equal to the United States. What do you make about U.S.-Chinese relations, and where do you see that going?
I think China knows, this is what the visit was all about. They really know that they need our American economy, the way we purchase. The problem for China and for the world is that China will run out of resources. She's taking them from all over the world, legally purchasing them and building and building. But there'll come a point when pollution and the things that they haven't done at home for their people, basically having your wife tied up like it's 700 years ago or something in Iraq, you can't do that to your people, and you can't do that to the land you live in. And so China is going to be forced over time to expand, I think, militarily, because she can only take so many resources and so much control. That's China's long-term systemic problem from their social positions of what they've done and how they run their world. That's the greatest fear. But right now they need us. They need our market. And they know that because of their ships that were all off of Long Beach and all the way to Shanghai for all during COVID. They just could not get their cargo ships out. So if they don't produce the cargo ships, they have to lock their people by the millions in their homes because the factories are closed. And so they need us. And right now they can't seem to find a way that they cannot deal with us. I don't think it's a military problem. I just think they need resources, and this is the way they've set their nation up. They've got to let their people free. They've got to be able to have a consumer society over there, which they refuse to do. And I think that is a dilemma, long-term problem for China.
Joe, let me turn to budget negotiations a little bit. I hate talking about that on a day like today, but the U.S. government does look like it's funded now through the end of the year, maybe into through January. But the hot button still remains on funding for Israel, funding for Ukraine. Will it be coupled? Will it be separate? What type of an assistance package is going to be given to Taiwan? Here the U.S. is $33 trillion in debt, and our debt to GDP is running at about 120%. Joe, I'm not seeing a lot of appetite in Congress to tie these bills together. Do at the end of the day, I think there will be an aid package for Israel? The answer is yes. Do I think there will be some type of aid package for Ukraine? I think that answer is also going to be a yes. And do I think there will be something towards Taiwan? I think that's going to be a yes. But I don't see these getting bundled together. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Joe? Because, when we come back from the Thanksgiving holiday, when Congress eventually gets back to D.C., these are going to be some pretty thorny issues that are front and center, and they're going to have to be dealt with.
Yeah, what we need to look at is, how is the war going in Ukraine? Have you heard anything? Do you see the videos anymore? What's Russia doing really on a daily basis the way it was? What does this mean? Ukraine or somebody's going to have to cause some huge military problems over there to get Congress to say, well, where's this money going? Who needs this? And I would love to see the new speaker in Congress put auditabilities on this money. I think really that's what you're going to see. They're going to tie it up so that they know where it's going. It's the worst thing that Zelensky wants. I'm sorry. But I think you're going to see some on the ground tactics going on in Ukraine. Who knows who will do it? I doubt it'll be Russia. But to get the money, they got to have blood. They got to have war machine going, and you're not seeing that on the daily news anymore. So
Well,
I just
you're
pray
not
to
seeing
keep.
it on the daily news because you can't turn on a news channel unless you're watching on the internet through a conservative network like ours. But you see constant communication related to Israel and anything that's anti-Trump. But the fact of the matter on the ground is the Ukrainians, have fought the Russians effectively to a stalemate. I mean, that's as best I can tell right now. Russia is suffering huge casualties in these insane military tactics that they're using, effectively throwing their untrained soldiers like cannon fodder out there. I mean, the losses are horrific. And yet, what do they continue to do? They continue doubling down on it. So I'm in sort of like your camp. I think there will be military aid to Ukraine, but I think it's going to be bullets, missiles, tanks, equipment. It'll be hard military assets, versus cash. At least that's what I hope ends up happening. I sense that will happen. And as far as the Israelis, because they've got to replenish their ammunition. And as far as the Israelis go, I think that will clearly pass both houses of Congress, and Biden will sign it. I don't know if they're going to end up being decoupling these bills or not. I know the Democrats want to tie them together, obviously because of the popularity of the aid to Israel. But I don't know if that's going to end up being the case, Joe. But I do know this, the Ukrainians it'll be coming up on 2 years in February, folks, that they will have been fighting the Russians. The losses on both sides have been bad. The Russian losses have been catastrophic. But Russia has more people than Ukraine, and they seem willing to sacrifice soldiers and bodies for what sake? And I don't know, you don't see the, quote, protest in this country like the crazy pro-Hamas people, these college students, college professors, and these far left-wing radicals that are pro-Hamas and anti-Israel. So it'll be an interesting budget battle coming up. Joe, we got about a minute and a half. Close it out with your thoughts here on Thanksgiving. A great American holiday. And, we always want to close on a festive mood. Give me your perspective.
Well, Black Friday and Cyber Monday are going to tell you exactly what's happening. I think Americans are just, because there's a lot of kids and there's a lot of people. We came out of COVID, or a year and a half past that. People are moving past that. Although COVID's popping up again, a couple of my family members have COVID. Who knows what's going to happen with that? I pray to God it doesn't rise its head again. But all in all, I think people are going to go to the holidays just being thankful, grateful, and everybody wants they want normalcy, and that's what I think we are. I think the people are fatigued across the board, and they want to have a nice Christmas and a nice life, and they want to go shopping and they want to travel. And I think America is getting back on track. All Biden should do is do normal things that he's not going to do. But I think it's a good time in the world, believe it or not. There are forces that want to make it bad, but I think this is a really good time. I feel it. I sense it. People are fatigued with the crap. They don't want to deal with it. They just want their life back. They want America to have its life back. They want everybody to live their life in peace. And I think that's what's coming for the holidays.
Well, Joe, I want to thank you again for joining me on this Thanksgiving Day here. Folks, we're happy you joined us today. Everybody have a great Black Friday coming up, Cyber Monday. And again, we support America, and we want to thank everybody for taking a little bit of time on your Thanksgiving Day to spend with us. Have a great evening. We'll see you next Tuesday.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most private assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott, PhD, 720-60...
We are here to defend democracy for the people.